for an inflationary increase in revenue limits with spendable aid attached, and significant adjustments for low revenue districts to meet the state average in revenue limits for some of our schools, many of our schools. We've asked for an increase in special education reimbursement to the level of 60%. We've asked for also an increase in mental health funding that is not time limited by grants. Finally, we've asked to increase the accountability and transparency of private voucher schools in return for the public funds they receive, and make the voucher enrollment limits permanent. With over $4 billion in surplus funds, Fox Cities Advocates believes this is a bold, necessary, and reasonable investment in our children, schools, and communities to build the kind of future we envision. Now I'm going to turn the moderation over to Denise Gomer-Hutchinson, who is the Northeast Wisconsin Coordinator for Wisconsin Network for Public Education. Thank you, Denise.
Thanks, Jackie, and welcome everyone. We're glad you're here. As Jackie said, I'm Denise Gomer-Hutchinson from Wisconsin Public Education Network, and I will be the moderator for today's program. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge Fox Cities Advocates for Public Education and their commitment to keep the public, other advocacy organizations, and legislators informed about what is happening in our great public schools in the Fox Valley, and how critical their continued advocacy is for public schools, the kids in Northeast Wisconsin, and the economy in the Valley. Great public schools encourage businesses to come to the Valley, to stay in the Valley, to be able to recruit workers, and to have a well-educated workforce. Fox Cities Advocates for Public Education, please remember the 4 key areas that they're talking about, because they're critical for the success of our public schools. We're going to get to the impact of these 4 areas, but first I'd like to have the panelists introduce themselves. So thank you to Fox Cities Advocates for this event. It's my pleasure to be your moderator for this discussion. We're going to begin with introductions of our guests today. We'll start with Dr. Hartjes.
Hey, good morning. Greg Hartjes, Superintendent of the Appleton School District. I know say that I have 2 minutes. Is that correct?
Oh, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
We'll just go down.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Good morning, Todd Tim, the District Administrator of the Hortonville Area School District.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Holly Prost, and I'm the Superintendent of the Kimberly Area School District.
Good morning, my name is Matt Zimmerman. I'm the Superintendent in the Menasha Joint School District.
Good morning, I'm Jim Strick. I'm the Communications Director for the Neenah School District.
Good morning, I'm Drew Nehans. I'm the Executive Director of Business Services in the Oshkosh School District.
And we'd also have, in the audience, some additional staff from some of these school districts that are also doing great work in these districts. So we're going to thank you for all being here for this really valuable discussion. Let's get started. We're going to get started with a brief overview from the representatives from the school districts in the Fox Valley. We'll go in school district alphabetical order. So we'll start with Greg. And Greg, you have about 2 to 3 minutes to talk about the really amazing things that you're doing in the Appleton School District.
Great, thank you. So as a school district, we came out of the pandemic and had lost 1,400 students. And so at that time, the 22-23 school year posed many challenges for us as our enrollment had declined. We've now stabilized at that number. We're about 15,200 students, so we're the 6th largest school district in the state. We stabilized there. We also had a lot of challenges coming out of the pandemic with attendance and student behaviors, and that came forward in outcomes for kids, which were not where we wanted them to be. Over the last 3 years, we've managed to reverse that trend and see that our graduation rates have gone up for 3 straight years. now have a graduation rate this past year that is higher than our 12-year average from the previous 12 years. We put some pieces in place at the elementary level around literacy, and so we actually were out in front of Act 20 the year before. We recognized that we had had declining third grade reading scores for 7 straight years. And so we now have reversed that, and for the first time in 10 years, our reading scores at third grade are higher than the state average. So we've put some pieces in place. We've been fortunate. We've passed referendums. So we did pass a referendum in 2022 that allowed us to reduce class sizes at our lower elementary grades, K 1 and 2, down to 20 to 1. We added STEM class, so all of our K through 5 students go to a STEM class every week. And that's really exciting for our kids, and so that's been very successful. I think the biggest thing that I do want to share, though, is that we have managed to meet the needs of our students as those needs have changed. And so over the last 3 years, like I said, we have significantly improved in all of our student outcomes, and that's because we've had the resources that we've needed. It's because we have had really hardworking people in our district. But the challenge is to have those resources. We are in a deficit budget of over $10 million a year. So for us to have the same support this year that we had for kids last year, we have to go in debt $10 million. Taking that out of our fund balance. Next year we anticipate having to take 10 to 12 million out of our fund balance. And then our fund balance will be used up. And so this is a short-term solution for us. I do want to mention, when I talk about changes in our student population and the needs of those kids, from 2015 to this year, those 10 years, we've had a decline in enrollment of 2,804 students, Caucasian students. At that same time, our students of color have increased by 1,636. So as a school district, we are changing, the needs of our students are changing. So what we are most proud of is that we are doing a better job today of educating students with higher needs than we did 10 and 15, 20 years ago. You going this way?
Yep.
Okay.
Was that 2 minutes?
I don't know. I'm being very lenient.
Okay.
2 minutes.
Hortonville Area School District has 4,400 students, 700 employees. We're the largest employer in our community. Over the last 12 years, it's one of the fastest growing school districts in the state of Wisconsin. We've seen a leveling of that enrollment in the last cycle, but if you go back over the last decade plus, one of the fastest growing districts in the state of Wisconsin. And we feel like our public schools in the Hortonville Area School District are a main reason for that growth. We're in the 88th percentile for achievement in Wisconsin of the 421 districts, so we're a high achieving school district, and we're very proud of that. We also have an award-winning mental health program at HASD, which includes availability and the removal of barriers, so children that need a little bit additional support in mental health can see a mental health therapist right on campus at any of our 6 schools. It's a program that has been copied throughout the state and in other states, and we're excited about that for the betterment of support of not only our high academic achievement, but the support of kids who may need some additional support. And we've removed the barrier for parents having to take off work and other barriers of transportation for that program. We're a low revenue district. We receive $11,325 per student. We know that there are some voucher schools that receive over that amount per student, and yet we're still responsible for the transportation and some other costs included in those relationships. In our changing enrollment, as Superintendent Hart just mentioned, we've seen a great increase in some of our medically fragile students and some students with larger behavioral needs that we need to service. Which calls for an increase in services like speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy. We've seen an increase in our homeless population, so we partner with our local churches in our community for backpack programs, and we've added social workers to ensure that there's support and food in the evening and on the weekends for the increases we're seeing in our homeless population. We've also answered the call from leaders in the state of Wisconsin on workforce development. We have a CNA program where we have students that earn their CNA as they're heading out of our institution. We have large increases in the youth apprenticeship program, and the vast majority of our students that are involved in those programs are staying in those fields of study to help aid the local economy when it comes to our healthcare industry and the trades. So we're proud of the solutions that we've offered as a public school in our community. We're proud that we have been one of the largest enrollment growth districts in the state of Wisconsin, but we also are seeing the needs of our changing population behaviorally from a mental health perspective, and some additional skills needed to continue to be the solution for some of the workforce issues that we're seeing in Wisconsin.
In the Kimberly Area School District, we are always in the proud pursuit of excellence, but excellence has two parts to us. It is excellence in the outcomes that we have, but also in the life skills that students need in order to achieve that excellence. So we are explicitly teaching things like perseverance, growth mindset, and time management to help students achieve excellence. And we are 5,000 students strong. However, much like Greg had said, our declining enrollment is an enrollment decline overall, but we're seeing an increase of students who have special needs. And so the students who cost more, we're seeing more and more of them over time. And we want to be able to have excellence for those students as well and meet every one of their needs. And so that is a continuing challenge that we have in Kimberly. Some of that excellence that we had 2 perfect ACT scores last year. We have the highest academic achievements in the area. We have our construction students working with the village to build Village of Harrison to build a pavilion at our new park. 27 of our students that are ProStart food students were fortunate enough to be able to cook at the NFL draft. We had 18 Scholastic Arts Awards for drawing, painting, ceramics. We had 20 for our super mileage vehicle. We were one of the best communities for music education according to the National Association of Music Merchants, and most people know about our athletic accomplishments. So we feel like we're well-rounded, helping students achieve in the academics, the arts, and the co-curriculars, but our challenges remain the same as all other districts, which is that per pupil funding is necessary. We have a $2.4 million structural deficit. That is our cost to continue. That is even with the 325 that we have been shown is likely to occur based on the veto that happened at the state. And so even with that 325, we do not have the ability to continue without cutting, and we are making do right now. We haven't had to compromise that excellence, but over time, that will have to be, the decisions will have to be made. The other interesting thing that I think is important to point out is that in the Legislative Fiscal Bureau's memo, they put more money into vouchers, but they did not. In addition to the 325, they gave vouchers an additional $135 per student, but they did not give that to public schools. And so that is money that is desperately needed for all of us sitting at the table here.
The Menasha Joint School District is a wonderful place to be. So we are just constructing, we're going to complete construction on a brand new middle school that was funded through taxpayers in a successful referendum 2 years ago that will open this fall. And it's going to be a net zero building, which is amazing. That should be long-term savings for taxpayers in the city of Menasha. We're really excited about it. We had noticed for several years that we were seeing a decline for our middle school students when they entered middle school, and we viewed this building as an opportunity to wrap around those students at a time when they need it the most. We moved our 5th graders into that school, so it'll be 5th and 6th on one side of the school that will be intermediate, and then 7, 8 on the other side. And really a nice gradual release of responsibility for students as they acclimate to middle school, and we feel like we're going to make better connections with kids, and we're not going to let kids fall through the cracks in that middle level, which is so important. So we are super excited about our middle school. Also came to an agreement with Winnebago County recently for childcare. Really excited about being the operators of University Children's Center. University Children's Center, a 5-star childcare facility. and it's one of 3 5-star childcare facilities in Menasha. Really excited about what that's going to do for our population, being able to maintain that. Unlike some of the other districts that have noticed the demographic shift as of late, Menasha experienced that demographic shift much earlier, years ago. And so we have always had a population that has been significantly more low income than our peers, significantly more students who have English learning needs, and significantly more students with disabilities. And so we've been working through some of the challenges that exist with educating students that come to school with those needs, and some of the funding barriers that have occurred because of that. So we had a structural deficit that we tried to put to rest last year. We had to close an elementary school and have some efficiencies. And so, really, we're excited though, because we've always been proud to educate students from those backgrounds. And we've really seen our growth amongst all students, but particularly students from low-income backgrounds, be a point of pride in Menasha. Our high school just had the best report card that they've ever had. They exceeded expectations for the first time. Very proud of that. We have 2 schools, Fox Valley Virtual and Bonta Bilingual, that provide some options for our families. So Menasha is a great place to be, but certainly we experience challenges just like every other school district up here, and a lot of that has to do with the state funding formula and the needs of our students, and the fact that we are not getting the money that we need from the state in order to meet the needs of the kids that we serve. This is easier said than done.
Bring a wireless mic. For the Neenah School District, we have 6,700 students, and as many of you are probably aware, we recently opened a new high school 2 years ago, thanks to a referendum that was a $115 million referendum, and we were able to move all of our 5th through 8th graders into our previous high school, and we now have the largest middle school in the state with about 2,000 students at Neenah Middle School. We still have a lot of needs at our elementary level. We did close 2 elementary schools within the last 2 years to, like Menasha, to increase some efficiencies, and that has done a lot for us in that way. But facility-wise, we still have a lot of needs at our elementary schools, and so that will be one of the next things that we address. Some of the things that I think are specific to us that really kind of set us apart is technology has been a focus for us for a long time. For the past decade, we've had our students at one-to-one technology in all grades, and that's been, like I said, going on for over 10 years in Neenah. And mental health has also been a big focus for us, kind of like Hortonville. We've been really kind of at the forefront of that with a mental health coordinator, Mike Altacruz, who does an amazing job. And then inclusion as well has been a big focus of ours too. We've had a lot of events at our schools over the last decade that have brought students of different disabilities and things like that together with other students, and that's been a big focus of ours. We've been recognized through Special Olympics as the only schools in the middle school and high school were the only 2 schools in the state that were recognized as national inclusion schools this past year. Some of our challenges has been our open enrollment numbers have been in the negative for a while now. We've been at about negative. They've been going down each year. There's a lot of reasons for that. Some of them are a little bit, I would say, self-inflicted, where we've maybe not focused on that and we've kind of let some of that slide. But we're starting to address that. And one of the big things that we did this past week actually was we signed an agreement with the Kiel eSchool for Virtual Academy. So we've heard from a lot of those people that are leaving that they want virtual options, which is something we've never offered before. And so we're looking forward to having that. We are a low revenue district as well, like some of the other districts here. And I would say for us, the special education funding has been one of our biggest challenges too, that we just haven't seen that our special education numbers continue to go up year after year, and the funding hasn't gone with it, and so that's been a struggle to try to keep up with that. And I'll pass it over to Oshkosh.
In Oshkosh, we are at just around 9,000 students, just under that. Much like Appleton earlier, we've seen since COVID, we were hovering around 10,000 students. We've dipped now right into that 9,000 area. We think it's going to level out. From all the statistics we have, it should level out over the next 5 or 6 years at around 8,700 students. So for the last 5 years, we've been working with our community to do facility consolidation. We have a 4-phase facility consolidation plan. The community just passed phase 2 in April, which was $197.8 million to do the completion of the elementary and middle school consolidation on the west side of town. We did the north side in phase 1. These projects are going to help us improve student safety, services to our students, as well as through the consolidation process. It actually is going to help us operationally. From phase 1, we're looking at about a $2 million annual operational savings from the consolidations that we did on that side. On the instructional side, we also adapted and we're going through a new literacy curriculum prior to and as Act 20 was happening. With the new curriculum, we have been able to see over the last 3 years that our literacy scores have been seeing steady growth. We've been getting about a 2% increase in scores over the last 3 years annually. We also have a different demographic of students. We continue to see our non-English speaking students increase. We're about 7% of our student population. English is not their native language. We have over 60 languages spoken in our buildings. That takes a significant amount of money to be able to have staffing and interpreters be able to assist our students and families with that many different languages being spoken on a regular basis. We also have a very really neat program, school to work program in our special ed department. The special ed department runs 3 different businesses that prepare our students with disabilities to get into the workforce. Each of our high schools have cafes that are run strictly by the special ed students. We have a mobile cafe, we have a mobile food truck that goes out and does about 65, 70 events a year. For students at the next level, they start in the high schools at the clinics, then they move and get asked to go into the mobile cafe and go out into the community. We've gone all over the state for appearances. We regularly have businesses such as Amcor that ask to have staff appreciation, and our students get to serve them for their staff appreciation lunch. In that, the other business that we have through that is a fairly new one. We have a Details Matter, which is detailing cars. We have them, they have their own little location and spot. They started this in December and it's been going really well. It took 6 months for them to prep the space in the area and start learning and figuring out how they wanted to market the business. And then they've been marketing and get fairly regular business of going in and detailing anyone's car who wants to come in. It's, again, another way for us to try to get out in the community. These students do need to be and can be viable employees. And we want to try to make sure that our businesses know and understand these are good employees that you can have in the future.
To hear the wonderful things that are happening in our public schools. It's just enlightening and refreshing, and the depth of what we're now delivering to public schools is really critical and amazing. So, I get to now start the second phase. I only have 25 different questions, right? No, just kidding. I broke it down to about 10. Don't feel like you have to answer every single one of them. If somebody else has already kind of put your position in place, and we'll go from there. The Joint Finance Committee has basically proposed a zero increase in funding, except for the $325 per student per year, but that is actually an increase that you'll have to charge taxpayers for. What are your thoughts on the proposed budget? It's kind of a two-part question here. And how is the budget going to impact your ability to deliver high-quality public education to your students. And many of you have already talked about the fact that you're already in a deficit spending situation and things like that. What is this going to further do to you? Greg, you want to start?
Sure. So when I look at the last two annual budgets and we average the annual increase in revenue, it's 1.66. So across the last 4 years, the increase in our revenue limit authority is 1.66. Unfortunately, the average inflation rate over those 4 years is 4.51. And so when we had a zero increase in the biennial budget that went from 21 to 23, it built a deficit for us. And it's a deficit that we can't get ourselves out of unless one of two things happens on the expense side or on the revenue side. And so we either need a substantial increase in revenue coming from the state, or we have to go to operational referendum. The alternative to that is cutting expenses. And so last night in our board meeting, we talked about what it would look like to cut $11 to $12 million in expenses. And as you can imagine, that touches everything in our district, including 65 educators, 3 administrators, 5 support staff. It's all of these positions that are leading to the success of our students. So when I talked about meeting the needs of students that have different needs than we had many years ago, we can't meet those needs if we have to be cutting those positions. So we're very worried about the budget. We're very worried about how it will impact local taxpayers. If at the state level, there's no extra dollars that are going to come to fund the 325 increase or anything on top of that. And so I would say we're in a financial crisis that's the biggest we've ever faced as a school district. Really in 2010 and 11, we had some tough times. As a district, we had to cut $3 million from our budget. And we did that through cutting staff, cutting programs, and cutting opportunities for students. It is our hope that we won't have to do that again. We're hoping that through state funding or through possibly an operational referendum, we can make up this $10, $11, $12 million structural deficit that we currently have. And again, the reason we have the deficit is because of the low increases over the last 4 years. And so, we've heard from some legislators that the legislature feels they gave a big increase over the last 2 years, but it was significantly lower than inflation. And so we have no choice but to cut operations and cut services for kids if the revenue doesn't keep up with inflation. And that's simple. That's simple math to be able to be concerned about.
Thanks.
The reaction to the Joint Finance Committee proposal was of concern. I echo a lot of the sentiments of Superintendent Harchis to put the 325 on the back of local property taxpayers instead of the state dedicating revenue when arguably there's a $4 billion surplus. And I understand the argument of maybe it's more around $2 billion because of one-time revenue, but with any surplus, and especially attendance at Joint Finance Committee and listening to our parents and community members in Kaukauna speak, and my colleagues here speak, and listening to the needs that people had throughout the hearings at the other sessions throughout the state. So I am concerned about the local property taxpayer footing that, and then putting the districts basically in a decision to go to operating referendum on top of them footing the bill for the 325 is deeply concerning to me. I understand that Joint Finance hasn't scheduled upcoming meetings, so I know that means that State Assembly leadership and State Senate leadership are meeting directly with Governor Evers, and I hope in the next 7 to 8 days that the leadership from those two legislative bodies and the leadership of Governor Evers, that some consensus can be met there on the 325 and on special ed reimbursement. Something needs to be done there. We're in this situation every 2 years, and I feel like it's a repeat of a situation 2 years ago and 4 years ago and 6 years ago. And then I would add, for low revenue districts, when there's some districts in the state of Wisconsin receiving $20,000 per pupil and other districts receiving $11,000, that needs to be looked at in some way.
We are coming into next year, our preliminary budget is balanced. However, we have no alternative sources for revenue. And like Todd had said earlier, the low revenue districts here, $11,325, that's what we are allowed to spend per student. It's inequitable within public schools. Some of the highest spending are over $20,000. However, voucher high school students are $12,700, so we aren't even at the level of voucher spending. And so the inequities are great. And when we talk about those student needs, the needs can only be met through state and local funding. That's it. We don't have another way to get money to help serve the needs of kids. Now, we've been able and strategic about our cuts that we've had to make. Like Greg said, as people resign, as people retire, we just don't replace those positions. We were able to balance our budget this year because we cut 9 positions, and that was administrative, teaching, and support staff that were all cut. So those jobs are no longer there. That will have to continue to maintain a low budget. Now, we are high achieving, low spending, and we want to maintain that. We are careful with taxpayer dollars, but to Greg's earlier point, we aren't keeping up with inflation, and that's not fair to educators. We need to provide a quality service. We need to pay people what they deserve.
I would just echo everything that my colleagues said, and I would add, in Menasha, we'll see a $1.2 million deficit if the state doesn't do anything here in the next couple of weeks. That would get us some additional resources. And that $1.2 million deficit, what we preliminarily plan to do is to take that out of fund balance for this year, and then we'll have to talk about how to go and get revenue from our local taxpayers. I think the struggle for us is the fact that that's coming on a $3.5 million deficit that we just closed last year. We've closed 2 elementary schools in the last 4 years in Menasha. I mean, we're doing things that are trying to make education more efficient and are going to deliver the same service to our kids and to our families that they expect, that they've come to expect from the National Joint School District, but the state funding is making that harder every single year. And, and the folks that are getting hurt from this, particularly in Menasha, are our students, and some of our students with who are the most vulnerable. Students from low-income families, students with English learning needs, students with special education needs. Included in that $3.5 million that we cut last year were aids for paraprofessional support for some of our students with special education needs. It was, some of our literacy coaches and literacy interventionists. It was administrators. We had to move strategically away from neighborhood schools, and we're busing more students. Families prefer neighborhood schools. And so those are things that we've had to do to be good stewards of the resources that we have and to provide services that are similar to the services that we've always provided in Menasha. But again, that funding formula makes it difficult. And we're not politicians. It doesn't matter to me who it is that wins the election, so long as they're giving us the resources that we need to do well by our students. And I would say that in the last, particularly the last 6 years, by not allowing funding increases to be commensurate with inflation or with the needs of our students, that we're not getting what we need in order to continue to do what we do best.
I don't know if I really have anything to add from an opinion standpoint. I would agree with everything that's been said. I just would add that our struggles in Neenah are very similar to what you're hearing from everybody else. Like Menasha, we recently closed 2 schools and we found those efficiencies, and we had to make those hard cuts. Like Kimberly, we didn't fill a lot of positions over the last couple of years, where when people retire or leave the district, we're just kind of trying to move on without them. So we are doing those things to try to become more efficient, and it's been a struggle, and it's just going to continue to be, like you've heard from everybody else.
Yeah, the only other thing I'll add is to kind of go off of what Holly was talking about, the difference in per pupil spending or revenue for the vouchers as opposed to public school. same goes on, and it's even more on the special education side. Special education vouchers get a 90% reimbursement. With this biennium, they're talking about getting us to 35%, but that's some certain, not some sufficient. So the reality is that's probably going to be closer to 31%, 30%. Why the discrepancy there for Oshkosh? We are close to a 15% of our general fund expenses get transferred into our special ed fund to cover costs. So just around $18 million a year is what we transfer to Fund 27 for special ed costs. And that's an area where we could see some market increase without property taxes going up.
I just want to add one thing. One of the things that, I've heard in Menasha, we did the same thing. You make these reductions through attrition, right? And the wonderful part about reductions through attrition is that, the people that are involved, you don't have to lay somebody off, but you still lose that position, which is providing essential services to kids. And that's a piece, and when you lose that position that's providing essential service to kids, that means that other people are going to have to pick up those services and provide those services so that kids get the same level of service that they've received in the past. So we say, reductions through attrition, which again, on the human side of it, the adult side of it for schools, does make that better because you're not laying somebody off. But at the end of the day, it still hurts kids.
Thanks. Well, Drew, you started the next question off for us, so which is a really good thing. But before, Amy, can you put up the one that shows the reserves, the billions. Here's an important thing: the billions of dollars. The surplus. That's what I mean. That's the term I need. They say it's one-time money, but this is 2024, 2023, 2022, 2021, and 2020. And you should all know that during the Walker administration, they had a deficit spending every single budget.
For 30 years.
So, 4.5 billion, 6.7 billion. This is the time when the legislature gave nothing to public schools because it was all ARPA and federal funding that went to public schools, and yet they claimed they gave the money to public schools. So, 4.6 billion. That's some pretty consistent revenue in their surplus. So they could have done something pretty powerful for all the schools in the state of Wisconsin, and it wouldn't have taken nearly all of this money. So just kind of think about that in this conversation of how we're talking about teachers and parapros and administrators doing more with less and doing services for kids, that kids are getting less of that attention because they've had to lay off people when the state of Wisconsin is sitting on this huge surplus. So, sorry, kind of a downer today. But, so question 2, what is the impact to your district with only a 37% some certain reimbursement for special education? Our most vulnerable children. And yet, our private schools are getting 90%, as Drew said, some sufficient, meaning 90% of the total cost of what it costs to educate that child. And our public schools are getting a pot of money that's called some certain, and when that pot of money is gone, it's gone, and it could be less than the 33% they were supposed to have gotten. Drew, I'm going to start with you. Do you want to add anything to what you said about special ed? What's going to happen to you guys if?
Yeah, I think just to localize and go a little bit further, if we were able to get to a 60% level of reimbursement, that's about $8.5–9 million in Oshkosh. we have an $8 million operational referendum. We would be able to potentially look at reducing a portion of that if we were able to know that we were getting a 60% sum sufficient annual amount. But now you're pitting us back into, we don't have the revenue, we don't have the money. Our only other choice is operational referendum to cover costs.
Okay. I'm going to go this way this time. Do you want to add
I
anything?
don't really
to
have
that?
anything to add.
Okay.
Thanks to Brian Adesso, our Director of Business Services here. Gave me the number 280,000 is what we would get with this current budget compared to if we would have had 60% self-sufficient, it would have been 2.1 million. So 2.1 million in Menasha would have allowed us to stay out of a deficit for at least the next 2 years.
I think a lot of times we hear people talk about it's transferring money from your savings account to your checking account, and it doesn't work like that. We have a regular fund and we have a special education fund, and last year in Kimberly we spent $10.7 million in special education, and we had to take $6.7 million out of our regular education fund away from those students who it genuinely costs $11,325 to educate those kids, and now we had to take money away from those kids to meet the special education costs that are required by law. And one of the questions that maybe you will be asking is, why public schools? And when we say all, we mean all. We take every single child, and if what their needs are something that we don't have, we figure out a way to support them and to get them what they need, and that takes resources to do.
I don't have too much to add. Our transfer amount is just over $4.3 million to cover the gap in the Hortonville Area School District. So our special ed transfer amount is just over $4.3 million. I would also encourage our partners to go back and look at the 2018 Blue Ribbon Commission report. There was a team that studied school finance in the state of Wisconsin, and it was a team that was from both political parties. And there were educators on the team, and out of that came recommendations that basically across the board we haven't followed. So I would really encourage our partners, the current leadership in the legislature, the governor, to really go back and revisit that 2018 Blue Ribbon Commission report, because there were some strategies coming out of that commission that would be extremely helpful that leadership in both parties supported at the time.
Just want to talk a little bit about, at the federal level is the IDEA law, and that is what requires us to provide special education services to students. And there is a part of that law that requires us to identify students that may have disabilities. It's called child find. If we do not, we can be sued by a family for not recognizing that their child has a disability. That's happened to our district. So I've spoken to legislators and they've said, we think you over-identify students on purpose. I told them that's ridiculous. Obviously, we have to follow the law, and if we don't, we could end up paying which we've had to do as a school district, we've had to pay when we've lost a case regarding child fine. So the struggle for us is simply this: at the federal level, the IDEA law came in with a 67% reimbursement to school districts for providing that service. But it has to come from the state level, and as Mr. Tim said, we're not getting that funding from the state level. So the federal law is not being followed by the state to meet the IEP needs of our students. So again, when I explain that to legislators, they've talked about you should just reduce your costs in special education. We can't. We have what's called maintenance of effort. We have to spend more money in special education next year than we did this year by a federal law. So we're caught between federal laws that require us to take many different actions, but they have to be funded at the state level, and our state refuses to fund at that level.
Greg, what will you guys, as the 6th largest school district in the state, what will you guys be transferring from your general fund to cover special ed needs?
$26 million.
$26 million. because of a very low reimbursement from the state, and that's not equal to what's happening in private schools. And do any of you have to provide services to those private schools that have children with special needs? I already know the answer to this question. It's yes, right? You all have to do the individual, the IEPs for those private kids that want a private school voucher. And then you have to provide the services free of charge if the private school can't provide those special education services, correct? Another additional cost that isn't in the computation of the actual cost, so it's a big deal. What is going to be, we know that oftentimes school districts get a lot of conversation around school districts by how much staff you have, or things like that. But we know that this is a staff-driven business, which isn't really a business, it's an education opportunity. But what is going to be the impact to your staff, and what changes are you going to incur if this is the actual budget? What's good? I think some of you addressed it a little bit in your opening comments, but we know that retaining and attracting staff is a big deal. How are you going to be addressing this?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about it already, so I won't take a lot of time. We have begun discussions with our board that we are either going to have to go to operational referendum, or we're going to have to cut staff. It's those two options. We closed one school for next year. It was a very painful experience for our community to have to close an elementary school that was open for 130 years. And I don't think we have the appetite to do that for another year or two. And so really it's just simply going to be we have to go to operational referendum, or we have to cut staff.
I would say we're the same.
Yeah.
We're down 8 FTE from last year into this year. Like I said, we've had a leveling of growth, even though we had significant growth over the past 12 years. We've made those by attrition. I echo the statements from Superintendent Zimmerman on that comment. We've also shifted our health insurance to self-funded health insurance. So we've made some benefit adjustments, but also worried about retention, and it's a numbers piece. When you look at the numbers of educators coming out with licensure now compared to what it was 15 years ago, it's different. And the reality is, I have great respect and admiration for my colleagues up here, but we're going to be competing for the same people as people leave this great field. And new people come in. There is a retention piece to this, and we have to offer a competitive wage and benefit to our folks as we're competing for some of those folks. So we have made moves by attrition. Our board has class size numbers that we make decisions off of, which has been very helpful to us over the past decade plus. But I think one thing we need to pay a bit more attention to as well is just the numbers of people going into this great field. And we have a responsibility to aid those numbers as we move forward.
I will add a little bit to what Todd said. If you think about your schooling experience and think of a fond memory, it is seldom you think about an exam you took or a textbook. What you think about are teachers. What you think about are paraprofessionals, the people that were there that made it go, that made you want to learn. And attracting and retaining people within the profession and to the profession is critical. And we can do that financially when we can pay them well, but also by creating a culture where we don't have to raise class sizes because they are able to meet the kids' needs. But that, again, is through resources. And so we will have to go to referendum. We have a strategic plan that I talked about before where we strategically are cutting positions as they become available. I hope we can continue to do that. But those are the only two ways that you can address a $2.4 million structural deficit.
I would just add that if you think about what one of the things that helps in retention is this idea that folks are supported in the work. And I wonder what, I would ask everybody to reflect on the message that a $0 increase state budget is sending to the people doing the work, the educators in the classroom and the paraprofessionals in the classroom. Does that feel like support for accomplishing what it is that they're setting out to accomplish? And what message does that send then to people who may be considering getting into the classroom, considering entering the profession? Does that send the message that you're going to be supported in meeting the needs of our future citizens? I don't think it does. And so I think that this state budget makes it harder for us to recruit and retain high-quality educators. I think it makes it harder for us to encourage kids to get into education. And I think that all of those things end up being bad for our future.
One other thing I would add is many of you may be aware, the struggles we've had finding substitute teachers, and we have a lot of days go by that we can't find anyone to come in and sub, and so our current staff gets stuck doing that, and that's an extraordinarily frustrating thing for someone who their job is to be a reading specialist or a math specialist, and now today you're teaching 3rd grade and tomorrow you're teaching kindergarten, and that's not their job. And so we're already stretching our staff thin in those areas when we're asking them to do things that are not their job. And this is just going to exacerbate that even more.
I don't have anything to add. Everyone up here pretty much covered the gamut.
Okay. This is a big question because we're all dealing with it all across the state. Vouchers. How are you dealing with the impact in your district? Do you agree with, there's a new bill that was just put forth to the assembly to freeze all expansion on vouchers and all funding to vouchers. Do you agree with that? And also, the cap on the numbers of people who can get vouchers is coming off in 2026. What impact will that have on your district? Drew, you want me to start with you?
Sure. Vouchers are a pretty big impact in Oshkosh. We transferred little over $8 million, or not transferred, taxed, a little bit over $8 million for the program last year. We're expecting it to get to $10 million within the next year or two. I guess personally, I wish we would take the public school districts out of the funding equation, find a different way to do it rather than having it be run through the schools. It's really difficult to get community members to understand. When our tax levy itself goes up, it's hard because that's not part of the tax bills. It's not part of a lot of the information they get or can receive. To really parse out that, and for us, $8 million of that, if we took that away, your tax bill wouldn't have gone up or could have come down, or would be different than the way it is. We need to find a different solution for how they want to fund that, if that's going to be a priority. I also struggle with when does a private school stay private when they're taking, we've got voucher schools of ours that are more than 50% of their operating expenses are on public taxpayers. When do they become public instead of private? Why is that still considered an outright private system?
Yeah, from a communication standpoint, for me, one of the things that we try to do is make our taxpayers aware of what their tax rate would be if we weren't paying for the vouchers, and we usually try to get that out every year, and it's pretty eye-opening. And I think people in the community that pay attention to that and see that message are always surprised when they hear about that.
I think sometimes the voucher message and the school choice message get confused, right? So all of us, I think, can appreciate school choice. If you don't like the education that you're getting in one district and you move to a different district, I think we would all agree that that's something that we would support. But for vouchers, you know, taxpayer-funded private education, any expansion on that or it does harm the public schools, and it's just not a level playing field. Our private schools that are receiving taxpayer dollars, so publicly funded private schools, are really, they don't have the same, the same playing field that we do. They don't take all students. The accountability measures are not the same. And so even when, if you're a parent and you're trying to compare, you know, a public school to a private school and whether or not you want to exercise moving your student, and maybe if you could take a private school voucher and go there, how do you compare? Right? There's not transparency there, and so I think that the question was, would we support a limit to that? You know, not further expansion. I would definitely support curbing expansion of the voucher program.
We don't shy away from competition in Kimberly, and we are happy to compete with voucher schools. I think exactly what these gentlemen have said to my left here is that transparency is the key. They do not have to comply with all of the things we have to comply with in Act 20, which is the literacy law that was just passed. They do not have to test all of their kids, only voucher kids, and report those results. And some of them don't even have enough of a sample size that those results are then published. The FOIA request, there is no FOIA request that applies to any voucher or charter school. So for any of the media here, you can't ask the same things that you were asking in public schools. And then the funding, we've had a number of students that have gone, the voucher money has followed them, and then that student comes back, but the money does not follow back within the same school year. We aren't allowed to know those students' names, all under the guise of student privacy, but we are used to dealing with private data in everything that we do. There is no reason that we can't know the names of those students so that we can have accurate tracking within the system. So I'm happy to compete with vouchers, but we want to see that done in a transparent way. We are all on a level playing field.
I don't have too much to add to that. I would echo that we have great relationships with our private school neighbors, tremendous relationships. We work together to feed our homeless population. We tested their staff during COVID so they could be open. I mean, we have tremendous relationships. But when it comes to funding and vouchers and voucher expansion, I would echo the sentiments that there needs to be better transparency. 50-some cents of our mill rate goes to fund voucher payments. It's nearing $2 million in the Hortonville Area School District, and we have a good number of voucher schools that reside in our district or just outside of our district. So at a minimum, I would advocate for transparency on local property tax bills. Just like you see in our community, you're going to see a charge from Fox Valley Technical College, you're going to see a charge from the municipality, you're going to see a charge from the school district. I would say at the minimum, there should be transparency on the local property tax bill. And then I don't know if you're getting to decoupling, but decoupling does concern me, because if we start shifting where the funding comes from, if it starts to come from state income tax for vouchers, you lose that transparency piece that I just spoke of in movement to identify that on the local property tax bill.
So apart from the dollars that we're talking about, where I struggle the most with vouchers is it's supposed to be a school choice program, but not all students get to choose to go to a private school. If you're a student with a disability or you're a student who's learning English as a second language, you don't qualify to go to a private school. So here's my struggle with vouchers. For every 100 students in Appleton, 18 students have a disability, 18% of our kids. 11% of our kids, so 11 out of that 100 are students who are learning English as a second language. Now, those students, we get reimbursed from the state at, I believe the last year was 6 or 7 cents on the dollar. So special education is 31%. You hear about that a lot because all districts have students with disabilities. But because EL populations are much smaller, you don't hear about the concern, and the dollars isn't that much. But it's still, there's students that cost more money to educate to meet their needs. So in Appleton, for every 100 students, 18 students have a disability, 11 students are English language learners. That means 71 students don't have either a disability or a language need. It has always been in public schools where we've taken dollars from those 71 kids to help meet the needs of the other 29 kids. That's always been the case. The problem now is that vouchers don't take any of the 29 kids. They take from the 71 kids. So now we don't have as many students with limited needs to offset the cost of the kids that have high needs. And that's what I explained to the Joint Finance Committee, is that that's why the special ed reimbursement is so critical and why we need it to be 60%, because we don't have enough of the other students to offset the cost of high-cost kids, because private schools are taking those kids. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. There is some irony in that private schools don't accept all kids, but I won't go there.
There we go. Thank you. I think this is going to have to be my last question, but I had two that I wanted, so if we can answer one of them really quickly and the other one would be take a little bit longer. With 45 pages of unfunded mandates, we should flush them down. How are you coping with the expectation to keep doing more with less? And the latest being Act 20. You were guaranteed $50 million out of the budget a year in the 2025 or the 23-25 budget, and that money hasn't been released to come to you. So you had to implement a new reading program without any funding to offset the costs of all of the pieces to that. Are you seeing success with the reading program? And was it a good move? Was this reading program a valuable move? And are you able to cover the costs of that program? And what did you have to stop doing to cover those costs? This is a big deal because you've seen an increase in Appleton. I think all of you talked about third grade reading has improved in this last year, which is great.
I just think with Act 20, and I'll speak to that only, I don't want to say the hoops to jump through, because a lot of it is good for kids. And that's really where it comes down to, all right, is this a mandate that's going to support kids? We're going to do that. We're going to put everything we can into that. If it's a mandate that we don't think supports kids, we may put that lower on our priority list. But the bottom line is we've had to use like our instructional coaches this past year to write the PRPs. Those are the reading plans that are required for students who don't read at a certain level. So they're not doing instructional coaching, they're writing plans. Our classroom teachers, we just had the best year of positive work from our elementary teachers. They worked so incredibly hard this year, and in the face of a lot of additional work that they've had to do. So I don't want to spend too much time on it.
Fully support Act 20 and applaud the work of our elementary folks, especially people that have been in the field for a long time, and the large shift it took. And initially we're seeing great results, and would argue that there's not many things more important than a child to be able to read at grade level by the time they leave third grade. That being said, would of course expect funding to match large-scale legislation that is put in place. And as a local organization, we do that. When we make changes, curricular changes, or professional learning or professional development changes, we're expected, and we do that. We plan for those changes. So when you're told that funding is going to back a piece of legislation that we fully support, Act 20, and we believe it's for kids, and then it's held up in some way, that can become frustrating, and then you're left as a local entity to divert funds to support that piece of legislation.
We didn't need Act 20 to motivate us to do the research-based practices for kids. We had already been doing that for years. And so Act 20 really didn't cause us to change what we were doing. But what it did do, as Greg had mentioned, is cause our literacy teachers to have to do vast amounts of paperwork that they maybe didn't have to do, which took time away from kids. So it had a pretty negative effect in terms of busy work and the management of it. I don't know that at this point, funding that, it was supposed to be for statewide literacy coaches, which never got off the ground, and that what we need is local money to try and support literacy. We don't need statewide literacy coaches. The one-time purchase of curriculum, it's money gone in our district, and so we don't need that reimbursement at this point. And so I have a little different take on it, because what we want to do is protect our teachers from mandates when they come down and allow them to do the most important work that they can do, which is working directly with kids and not on paperwork. And so that I agree with Todd that the things in Act 20 were good, but we didn't necessarily need Act 20 to motivate us to do them.
I think Act 20 was good, and I think, as was said earlier, I think it was Todd who said it, who can argue with getting kids to read at 3rd grade, right? If there's not, if that's not one of the primary purposes of public education, what is? And it would be nice to see money, to help us in the full implementation of Act 20. That we've often advocated for a revenue limit exemption for all costs associated with Act 20. I think that would be a great bill. If there's a lot of things that folks, disagree in terms of, what the role of public education is, like I said, I think we can all agree that one of the primary roles of public education is to get kids to read. Let's fund that piece of it, and let's give us local control in terms of a revenue limit exemption to completely fund all the costs associated with Act 20, including literacy coaches, literacy interventionists, and keeping class sizes low, kindergarten through 3rd grade, in addition to the curricular materials.
Well said. I have nothing more on that.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that as well.
Well, Matt kind of led to my final question, and that is, I'm not getting to the tax, state tax and all of that kind of stuff, which I really wanted to, but I want to give time for the media to ask questions and then the community to ask questions if they would like to. And so we're going to end with the questions here from me. If you could have one improvement in the state budget, what would it be? Who wants to start?
I will start.
Okay.
It's an easy answer. Additional per pupil funding.
And that would take, you mean like taking the revenue caps off?
Well, if they did 325 per student, what we actually need is probably an additional 535 per student to make our budget work, and that's continuing each year. So additional money per pupil.
That's spendable money.
Spendable
big
money.
difference.
It's a great question. I could land where Superintendent Press is coming from. I could also land in special education reimbursement at 60%.
Sounds sufficient.
Correct. With seeing what's happening in our state. And I think that either of those would be a benefit to all of our schools in the state.
I would say the 60% reimbursement on special education, because it does benefit all schools, as does per pupil. I just think we have a better shot with the legislator in our area to go after the 60%. I mean, really, that's it's the only thing they've been willing to discuss with us.
Okay. Matt, you want to go again?
60%.
I would would say the same. I was going to also say the special education funding, I think, for us would have the biggest impact.
Drew?
I agree. In Oshkosh, the 60% reimbursement in special ed would be the most impactful.
Yeah. Look at this. Marquette Law School poll came out, and this is people, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, they qualified themselves in those areas. And 76% of those people said favor a major increase in funding for special education in our schools. 76%. And yet, I sat in a listening session with Joel Kitchens, who happens to chair the Education Committee, and he said, there's no way we're going to get to 60%. You know, and they proposed going to 37, some certain, not some sufficient, which is a big difference. So we'll see what happens, because the state of Wisconsin has spoken and want to see funding to special education. So I think I've grilled you guys enough for a little bit here. We'll have some concluding remarks, but we're going to open it up to the media if you guys want to ask questions from here, or how you would like to do that.
So quickly, I believe that we'd all like to do like interviews after the fact, just to speak with each of you individually. If that would be all right, we could make some decisions on who we would like to talk to then. I do have a specific question right now, is that you spoke a little bit about how if you don't get any funding, you would have to make cuts. Do you have any specific areas where you would be making those cuts, or would they be just straight across the board for the entire district?
We aren't that far along in our discussions with our board. Last night we talked about developing our guiding principles for that exact question. How are we going to do that? What will be our priorities going forward if we have to cut, $10 to $12 million in staffing from our expenses?
We're not there yet. We have our budget that's going to be balanced coming up. That might take some money out of our fund balance or savings for that balance. But I would also point out that we have been enacting cost-saving strategies, whether that comes to health benefit, whether it comes to making moves through attrition. So what cuts might look like could be higher class sizes, where you need less staff in that tier 1 room, which would be a really sad situation for us. And I think we're probably like the other 420 school districts in the state, where you're going to be left with a situation of, if it's not funded from the state, do you go to your local taxpayers and say, will you fund us through operating referendum? I think that's where the discussion would be for us.
And I had mentioned before that in order to present a balanced budget this year, we had 9 positions that were administrative, 2 administrators, we had 5 teachers and paraprofessionals that were reduced. We would have to go to referendum to do that. It has been able to be done, but we've done it over years. Strategically in the attrition, we're fortunate that our declining enrollment is happening from the 4K level and then rolling up as we go, and so we're able to follow those class sizes, and then as we reduce class sizes, we're able to reduce staffing as well. So one-time expenses don't necessarily help that cause. We need the recurring expenses to be reduced over time. We may get to a place in the future where we have to sit down and talk priorities if we don't have appropriate state funding.
For us in Menasha, we wouldn't look at making any further reductions for this coming school year. We would likely run a deficit budget, pull that money out of fund balance, and then look at what our options are moving forward.
Yeah, similar here. I don't think we'll have any issues for this coming school year, and then beyond that, we haven't gotten into any specifics.
Similar in Oshkosh, we're working on a 3 to 5 year staffing restructuring. Don't have specifics for you at this point. We've just begun the conversations. Short term, we're okay for the upcoming budget, and then we'd be looking at any current vacancies on whether we can eliminate those or not.
Anyone else? from the media want to ask a question now? Okay, then what we'll do is we'll go to the community. Oh, do you have one? Okay. We'll go to the community to see if anybody has a question from the audience. Carol.
I'm curious as to if any of your elected officials have reached out to you about the needs in your school district.
We have a great relationship with our elected officials. We do agree to disagree at times. Was just in Madison at a dual credit half-day meeting to increase opportunities for students throughout, not just in Hortonville, but throughout the state when it comes to dual credit. Have really appreciated, especially in CESA 6, our region, that in the spring we meet generally at least monthly with our elected people in the Assembly and the Senate. So I will say and recognize that they have a very difficult job to do and have spent a good amount of time with us in the region.
Anybody else?
I think that captures it.
Yeah, go ahead.
That Todd captured it. That's accurate for us too.
Have you heard from anyone, as a follow-up, have you heard from anyone since the joint finance 0-0 suggestion came out? You have, Matt?
Yeah. So both Senator Alfheim and Representative Crawford had called and said, hey, this is what we're seeing, and reiterated that they understood what we needed, and just wanted to more explain and find out a little bit more about how that would impact our district. So I think that our representatives in this area have been incredibly responsive, and as Todd said, agree to disagree at times, right? But they're always reaching out, asking us what we think, what we need, how they can support, and just sometimes we're just not able to get there.
Anyone else from the community? Do you want to stand up and ask it from back there, or you want to come up here?
Whatever you want. My name is Chad Andrews from Appleton. In regards to the teacher shortage, how can the state budget help you address the teacher shortage?
Everyone hear the question? How can the state budget help you address the teacher shortage? Greg?
We are always struggling with adding staff that will help meet the needs of kids and providing compensation and benefit increases that hopefully meet inflation. And so our struggle with not having the funding that we need means that we have to look at not giving compensation increases that are at the rate of inflation. We have to turn a lot more costs over to staff around health plans. And so that's what we look at. And the biggest detriment of all of that is going to be when those educators and those paras and secretaries talk in the community to individuals who may be considering a career in education. They just simply don't speak highly of getting into education. And I saw that. I just finished my 33rd year in the Appleton Area School District. I saw that first following Act 10. First time that I saw where educators were really looked at differently, and now I'm seeing that again at this time as we look at trying to be able to afford what we hope are the best and the brightest kids coming out of college, and it's very challenging.
I think we have to be competitive in the marketplace, not just with schools, but with private industry, because teachers have amazing skills. So I echo that a competitive wage is necessary. So when you ask what the state budget can do to help retain or increase the pipeline of teachers, number one, there's a financial piece to the puzzle. I do think we also have the responsibility as administrators to increase the pipeline. So we've added a teacher apprenticeship program. We partner with Fox Valley Technical College and their in their education program to get some of our people on the pathway. I know Appleton does a guaranteed interview, and Kimberly does a guaranteed interview for kids that leave those organizations and come back. They're guaranteed to interview, and I know Appleton's took the forefront on apprenticeship programs through Julie and Appleton. So I do think we also have the responsibility to grow the pipeline, but the resources need to be there for people to stay in it, knowing those folks are gonna not just compete in the public framework, but they're competing in the private framework as well.
I think the question was, what can the state do? What can we do in the state budget? And I do think, long-term linking revenue limit increases to inflation would be a positive thing. And I think that the rhetoric around the state budget is important. When the news sources, and kids are coming out reading the news and they're seeing that, our public schools are underfunded, I do think that hurts our ability to recruit and retain high quality educators and to get kids to go into the profession. So, by increasing the amount of support in the budget, financial support, I think that would go a long way in helping our teachers feel supported and helping attract kids into the profession.
Okay. Any other community questions? Oh. I don't know, I don't think I'm gonna read, Jan.
I was a teacher for many years, my voice. I'm a retired educator from Neenah and Catow, and I guess my concern, I'm old enough that at one point in my teaching career, special ed reimbursement was 60%. So you're not asking for anything new. It has a historical significance. My question is, what do you attribute the lack of interest in spending the $4 billion surplus on our biggest investment, which is our kids, and the willingness to pass, it seems okay to pass the tax increase on to the locals, either via referendums or other kind of things. So I guess, why do you think they're unwilling to do that? I've been puzzled, obviously.
Ready?
I really believe that they've been unable to come to consensus between the two parties. One entity that is really advocating for a statewide income tax cut, and another entity that is focused on extended child care counts, K-12 funding, and UW funding in this 2-year cycle. And they haven't been able to, this is my opinion, they haven't been able to come to an agreement on those two pieces. And joint finance, walking away a couple days ago, I believe was because those entities are getting back in the room and talking about, kind of here before the last 7 or 8 days, whether they can get to an agreement or not on those pieces.
Anybody else? Amy?
My question is, we've been seeing a lot of things in the news about AI and corporate leaders saying prepare for layoffs, prepare for job eliminations or job changes. AI is going to dramatically change the way that we see the workforce. And my question to all of you is, when we're talking about a dramatic change in technology and a dramatic change in the way we work, and we look at a lack of funding and flatlining for 16 years, how does that help you as administrators in your school districts to help adapt and change curriculum to prepare kids for the next generation? And I know we didn't even touch today. I've seen a lot of your incredible curriculum, like the Bergstrom Automotive Center in the Neenah Joint School District. There are a lot of creative ways that these schools are teaching our kids and developing them from a workforce standpoint, shop, welding. You wouldn't believe it. Go online, check out their curriculum handbooks, and find out what kids are learning. It's not what you and I learned before. But how do they do this when they keep getting flatlined? And how are they going to prepare our kids in our state, when things change and we find our fellow employees, our fellow coworkers, colleagues without jobs or needing to change, if we're not preparing kids to flexibly adapt, to jump into that marketplace, to keep Wisconsin competitive? Kind of a hard question.
And who wants to take those? Good.
So what you're really talking about is professional development. And what we see is that there are lots of changes that are out there. Kids are changing really fast. COVID changed kids and how they behave in schools. We've seen an increase in mental health issues, and we've seen new technology with AI. And what you need is for teachers to have the time, which takes money, and the resources, which takes money, to be able to learn as fast as the kids are learning. And so, again, we're right back to the same place with this adequate funding so that we can control that at the local level to teach teachers what they need. And our teachers are learners. They love to learn. I am so excited about AI, and I hope that we can leverage it and teach kids how to use it, but we need money to be able to provide the appropriate professional development to teachers to be able to do so.
Anybody else? Any other questions? All right. Then I think we'll wrap up so that we can give the media some time with each of our education professionals. And I want to thank everyone for being here today. And panelists, thank you so much for what you do every single day. And I will reiterate that you do not have your summers off. We all know. And I always hated that. As the daughter of a teacher, people would say, "Oh, your dad is so lucky because he has his whole summer off." And I'm like, "He does?" I never saw that. So we know you're all working every single day and doing more with less, and more is expected of you. And we want you to know that what you're doing is so critical. There is money. There is money available to support and help public education. And we need help with the special education costs, especially when we have things like the Marquette report that was shared with us. And we need help with regards to stopping and slowing down what's happening with vouchers. And you can see the graphics over here in the window of what voucher costs look like in the valley. And but just as important as the money is that the legislature is not fulfilling the state constitution obligation to provide and fund an adequate public school system. It's in our Constitution, and they are not meeting that commitment. Let's hold them accountable, like they're holding our public schools accountable in more ways than they are the private schools, and let's be part of the solution. Please go to Fox Cities Advocates for Public Education, to their Facebook page, see the amazing things they're doing, and also to Wisconsin Public Education Network site, and join us for our summer summit in Green Bay on July 24th, where we're talking about building community for thriving public schools, because it does take everyone. It takes all of us to be a part of that. So thanks for being here today, and again, panelists, you were amazing. Thank you.